All right, guys, Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. So this is day 2 of the week of work, and I'm putting in on my wife's 4-door 55. So I forgot the dog had a grooming appointment this morning, so I had to take her over there, and it's a little ways of a drive, but anyway, I'll have to kind of wait around for hour and a half before, maybe even 2 hours, before they call me to tell me she's ready. And then I'll have to drive with her and pick her up. And then on the way back, there's a big bridge, and she knows when that bridge that there's a park there, so she starts scratching at the side window of the truck because she knows she's at the park. So I'll have to stop at the park, let her run around a little bit. So I'm going to lose a little bit of time today, and I'm kind of debating on whether to even get started on this thing, because I'll have to open the garage door, move a bunch of stuff out, you know, and then I'll have to get all my tools out, string my air hose out and all that stuff. And then I don't want to have to leave that stuff outside. You know what I mean? So unattended, we'll say. So I'm going to go kind of ahead and just hold off, I guess. I might go ahead and pull the fender off here. I've still got a little bit of work to do underneath there. It's just a little bit of grinding, but I think I'm going to go ahead and pull this fender off. And I don't want to pull this one off in here that close to the hard top, just in case I drop it or, you know, swing it around by accident and go across the fender of that one. So I might take that fender off there and then just lay it over there up against the door or something, but I'll figure it out. Dang it. Already losing a few hours today. Well, I forgot the dog had a grooming appointment this morning at 9:30. So this is going to take some time out of my day for sure. Gotta drive 15 minutes to get her to the groomer. She's already on to where she's going. She knows where she's going. She doesn't like the groomer at all. Anyway, this is Route 66. And coming up on the Blue Whale down here. Port City Park sign over here has been there since I was a kid, like in the 70s. I'm sure it's been maybe redone or repainted and stuff, but it pretty much looks about the same. So here's the Blue Whale. It's no longer privately owned. I think the city bought it, something like that, and they've done a whole bunch of cleanup around it. There's the old ark. It's looking pretty rough. Anyway, that's all you get. After looking at that, this has weld around it. So not only is the bolt broke off in there, they've welded the nut in there. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to mess with trying to extract that bolt. It takes me way too long, especially with my old dull drill bits that I have. So I'm just going to cut the center of this out and replace it with flat metal, drill a hole in the sheet metal, bolt a nut down to it, square nut, weld the square nut, and fix it. I do have to fix this before I can put the door on the car. Well, I can go ahead and put the door on the car, but I need to get this fixed so I can bolt it to the car and try to get a gap. That way I need to know if I need to bend this in or out. Boy, this fender is going to be a lot of work, man. Probably going to be a good couple of days. Well, this is a half day anyway, so definitely going to be a couple of days. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this first. That is body filler right there. So I need to grind all the paint off the bottom of that fender. So I'm telling you what else I'm going to find. But anyway, I'm going to try to get this straightened out. I need to weld a 1/4x20 square nut on that, which I'll have to grind that flat. I'm going to remove this bracket, cut off this garbage, try to get that removed to get off their custom weld job there, because I want to be able to bolt that on. And I'm going to go ahead and grind the heads of these rivets off and to remove this, and I'll have to straighten up the flange. Notice the flange right here has a spot that's bent outward, so I'm going to hammer dolly that back in. And I was going to do quite a bit of work to it, but I definitely want to do this as well before I bolt it on the car, because when I go in there and straighten all this flange out, because this flange is bent, you can see it. So I need to straighten all this out after I remove this, you know, repair all this, which I may have to, you know, get this off and add weld to that flange and then try to grind it smooth and fix it so it doesn't look like it's ever been welded. But I want to be able to bolt that on and then align up the fender, because if I just fix that hole and then bolt it on the car and line it up, when I go back and work on this, it may change the way the fender meets up to the car. So I want to kind of make sure I don't have any surprises later after paint, you know what I mean? All right, here we go. That's custom. Well, the battery died while I was sitting there hammering that flange out. This was all smashed in and tweaked out, so I went in and I used a combination of different hammers. Got the flange all nice and straightened out and true. You can get that little crease out by using the flat end of that hammer right up in there and then hitting the head of it with a ball peen. But anyway, I got it worked out pretty nice. So, not a big deal, it's just the way the factory done it, but you can kind of see the little kick in right here, and then it has a raised bump right here. So I'll take my roll-up disc and I'm going to smooth this all down even. And then looking down the flange here, I can see a little bitty kick up right here. So I'm going to hammer that out, use a hammer and dolly and hammer that out. I'm going to grind this off, remove it, fix this flange there and over there, and then I've got this piece cut out. I'm going to weld in a piece of metal first and then drill a hole in it and weld a square nut on the other side. And then after it's all cooled off, I'm going to put POR15 all down inside the brace and let it run down in there like I did the last one, and then patch that. But I'm going to put a square nut in here to get rid of that coarse thread gnarly bolt. And do some grinding on the back side of the outside of the fender to see how bad this is getting. I'm probably going to have to blast this area with my blaster really good to see what I'm working with here. Alright, so I got this all hammered and dollied out. I ground that down smooth so I can weld a square nut to this. I'm going to put a 1/4x20 square nut on there so it'll take a bolt instead of that coarse thread screw bolt thing. So what I got here is just some, this is just some stuff, but this is something that I used to screw into something, and then this hung on a wire so I could paint it. But anyway, what I do is I take them square nuts. They have a rounded side, which is the outside, and then this flat side is obviously the side that'll go down, you know, to the metal. But anyway, I stick it on something like this to hold on to it, and then I take it in there to my bench grinder with a wire wheel, and I grind off the CAD coating around the sides and on the part that's going to be meeting up to the metal. So now that that's clean, I can take it off there. And then I've got a couple of bolts here. What did I do with the one? There it is. I got a little 1/4x20, just an old used bolt, and I'll actually bolt that square nut down tight and then I'll weld it on. But anyway, I did a 3/8x16 flange nut. After I weld in a piece of flat metal here and drill a hole in it, I'm going to be welding on a nut to it, which I could do it before I put it in there, but I've got to cut this area out of the fender anyway and patch it, so I'm just going to do that. But anyway, that flange nut, I'm going to use that instead of a square nut because I've only got a couple of square nuts left on 3/8x16, which is the factory size for that. So I just used a flange nut. Now this was actually a peened lock nut, has 2 peen marks in it. So I used a tap, a 3/8x16 tap, and I just went in and smoothed it off. So now the bolt goes in and out of there without being a lock nut. I don't need a lock nut down here. but that's the only flange nut I have left. It's 3/8 by 16 out of all the other stuff there. A lot of it's metric or fine thread. Anyway, I've got this one here, 5/16 by 18. This is going to be one of the several that I've got to put in up here of the 4. But anyway, so right now I've got my little portable blaster set up out here. I'm getting ready to string. I'm going to take the fender out there and run the air hose out there, and I'm going to blast all of this area down here because it's pretty gnarly looking, and I'm going to blast down here a little bit too. But I just kind of want to see what all's going on, because if anything's super thin, it'll pretty much go through, especially when I grind all the paint and stuff off this lower. Like I said, I know I've got some filler right here, so I need to pull that, you know, grind this out back here and see what I got going on. But I'm going to blast this. That's interesting. So the square nut from the factory that's in there fell out. Thing's pretty crusty anyway, so I'm glad that fell out, because now I can, it's not like when everything's painted and I get ready to bolt the extension on and then it pops loose and just spins, you know what I mean? So now when I'm welding in those new square nuts, I can weld in a new one there. So these things, I gotta tell you, they are not in that fender very good. They I don't know, sometimes they're loose, and I've seen like one side be loose. So if you go in there and try to drill and tap or whatever, you know, extract them bolts, sometimes it just knocks them out of there. So it's like they're tacked in just the ends. They're not tacked along the side. So I would rather just knock them out of there with an air hammer. It doesn't take 3 seconds to knock each one of them out of there, and then just stick a square nut on there and weld it on. It's, to me, 10 times faster, but I'm glad that fell out. Alright guys, so I ground the head off of what was left of the hardware here, and then I used a hammer and a punch and knocked them down. So this piece has been welded on, so I put I put a cut in there with my cutoff wheel, and I went probably about halfway or a little over. So what I'm going to try to do is sit here and try to work this and break it off. And I'm sure it's going to tear up that outer edge, so I'm going to have to add weld to it and then go back and grind it, kind of like I do to get door gaps. Well, it didn't slice into it, so that's a good thing. So now I can blast this piece really nice. And the main part's still pretty flat, but the flange there's a little tweak, so I'll lay that down and hammer this flange down flat. Now this is pretty rough, so I'm going to have to go in here and hammer this flange out. But right here, I'm going to have to try to make that look like nothing's ever been welded. So I'm going to go in here and grind this. It actually has a little kick in it, so that's what I'm kind of worried about. But anyway, I'll get that lined out with the grinder or die grinder with a burr bit. Try to shape that real good, and if I If I have a spot that's too low, I'll just tack some, stack some tacks and then go back and regrind it and file it, and it should make it look like nothing's ever been there, because I want that piece to bolt on. I did grind the rivet heads off on this bracket here, ground the rivet heads off and then knocked it out, and then I went back and kind of cleaned that up a little bit with my sanding disc, and then I laid it down on the concrete and I hammered these flanges out straight because they were kind of tweaked out a little bit. The rest of it looks pretty good. Now when I remove these, I take a cone burr on the die grinder and I scribe what side it is. You don't see that because it's on the back side, but anyway, I put an L on this one, I have an R on the other one. You don't technically have to do both once you scribe the letter in for one of them. The one that doesn't have a mark in is the one for the opposite side, you know what I mean? But I just went ahead and did it. But the thing about doing this, you're grinding into the metal a little ways to put the letter on there. After this is blasted and it's painted, it doesn't cover it up and you can't see the letter. You'll always be able to see the letter. Anyway, now I can hammer this flange piece out here and then work on that spot up there. And I got a little spot right here I need to work on, but I got a lot of work to do, basically. There is a spot here for this, and this is actually supposed to be angled and it's bent back, so I've got to bend that over, but it looks like it's part of the metal's gone right here, and this takes one of them coarse thread gnarly screws, so I may end up having to weld a square nut 1/4 by 20 here, so I'll take a 7/16 headed bolt, 7/16 socket or wrench. All right guys, you can see where I got my new square nut on here, and I bolted it down and I just barely snugged it. That way that's actually two pieces of metal together, so I basically tightened that up so it crushes the metal, and now I can weld that on there. But anyway, if you didn't bolt it down pretty tight and you welded your square nut on there, when you went to bolt this onto the car and everything's painted, when the two pieces of metal crunch together, it could, chip your paint or do something silly. So that's why I tighten it down with a bolt, and it's a bolt I don't care about, so which is not really going to hurt it anyway, unless I get weld up here on the thread, which I've never done that before. I'm just kidding. All right, we'll work on this flange here. This thing was pretty tweaked out. Alright guys, getting ready to weld in a new piece here. So somebody had welded the nut on there. Apparently it broke out or something. Somebody went in there and welded it, so I had to end up cutting this area out. So what I got is a square nut, a 3/8 by 16 square nut, and I've welded it on both sides. And this is pretty thick sheet metal I've got here. It's actually just a little bit thicker than this, but I 45-degree angle ground all the edges. I've got it to where it'll lay down in there. So I'm going to weld this in and then grind it, and it should be a pretty good patch, I hope. All right, guys. 4:47. Just about time to quit and clean up the mess so my wife can get her parking spot back. So I got a little work done to the fender, but not near as much as I wanted to, but I only got a half a day in, so I guess I'll take it. So being as this fender was from a Bel Air, I had to basically drill the holes for the Chevrolet script on the fender. In case you don't know, 55 Chevy Bel Airs, you can see these holes in the fender. This is for a piece of stainless trim to go down the fender. There's also a little piece that goes on the door to meet it. The 210 series, which is what the 4-door is, does not have that stainless trim. It got a Chevrolet script on the front fender here, and the 150 series did as well. But anyway, so I had to go in there and get some measurements off of this other fender to put the script on. So I've got a brand new pair of Chevrolet fender emblems here. They're Danchuck, but it's actually pretty straight. I used a caliper and I went in and measured off of this one. This is the fender that's pretty much roached out. The whole end is rusted away. The headlight cap area is really nice on it, but this is off a 210. So I went in here and measured off of the body line right here. I run the sanding block right here to make the metal shiny on the peak, and I did the same thing on that fender, and that was where I got my height measurement from. And then I measured from the flat part right here on the front of the fender right there this way, and that was 3 3/4 of an inch from the flat part right before the headlight kicks up, this flat part right here, to the center of that oval hole, 3 3/4 of an inch. So I want to say that was 11 inch from there to the rear one. So what I did at that point was I took a piece of poster board and I laid the script up here, and I reached in behind the tabs with a Sharpie and kind of started the mark and pushed down on it a little bit, and it put indents in it. And then I basically used a little drill bit just in my fingers and made the holes, and then I laid the script on that to check it, and then drew around it. And then at that point I drilled this hole first, and then I drilled this hole at the back. That was my 3 3/4 and then the 11 inch. And then I took 2 little number 6, I think, screws and stuck them through for that hole and that hole on that, through the holes I drilled in the fender. And then I went in with a Sharpie and dotted the 3 center ones and then drilled them out. So worked out pretty good. So I can run here through everything I've done on the fender. Yeah, let me get this all broke down. I mean, really not too bad for a half a day's worth of work for all the little tedious crap I had to do. But I got that bracket off of the fender where it was welded. So I got that removed. I added weld, put a whole bunch of tacks there, added weld to it, and then went back with a barrel roll and got the curve in there, and then flattened everything else off. And then I used my little 1032 Allen button head screws. These are the same diameter and shape as the factory rivets, so you can actually, you know, I like them. But I ordered a pack of 100 from eBay a few days ago. It was like, I don't even remember, $13 with free shipping for a pack of 100 stainless steel 1032s. At Lowe's, I want to say they're like 2 or 3 in a package, and they're almost $3 or $4 or something per package. Each bracket takes 5, and then this bracket that goes on down here, it takes 2, so you're going to have 7 per fender. So I just went ahead and bought the big pack. But anyway, I don't have enough of these. I only have 4 of these stainless Allen buttons, and I've got 2 on the other fender, and then I put 2 on this one. So I just used some regular old bolts that I had here with some nuts on the back, just to hold the bracket on. That way I can put it back on the car. But you know, I got this flange all straightened out. It was all tweaked out. I got it all straightened back out like it needs to be. I got this bracket cleaned up and straightened out, put back on. A lot of hammer and dolly work on the flange. The flange turned out really nice. I welded a 1/4x20 square nut down here for the lower splash apron to bolt to. I put in a piece of steel here with a square nut, 3/8x16 square nut welded to it, so the fender will actually bolt on like it's supposed to. But I need to get in here with my belt sander and finish grinding this smooth. But anyway, I got quite a bit done, I guess. I seen there was a bulge spot right here, and I was like, why is that bulged out? So I started hammering on it with my body hammer, and it's rust. So there's another piece of metal right here that's got that singed. So there's actually rust right here. So I'm gonna have to cut a square out of here and attach that. Like, it's the gift that keeps on giving on this fender, but I am gaining, you know what I mean? I cleaned off the Bondo worms out of the fender, and I'm actually going to use some steel nails, like that you'd use to hammer wood together. I use nails, and you got something to hold on to, and you got the big round part of the head of the nail, and you just stick it in there until it's flush, and then start welding it. And it's like a perfect plug for that. I could go in here and, you know, weld this up just by adding weld to it, but I don't want to overly warp it or tweak it, so I was just using nails and just do tacks. You know, tack one, and then I'll tack another one, and then I'll come back and tack, just keep doing it until they're all done. But it takes a little longer, but I don't have that much warpage that way. So I did bend this flange back down. This thing was tweaked out, it was almost straight. And I did check it with a bolt, and it tightened down tight and stayed. So I was afraid that might be stripped out, but it's not. So tomorrow, I've got to put a patch down here. There's Bondo worm that's sticking out of there I cleaned off. I blasted this area a little bit. So I am going to patch that down there, try to cut out somebody's handiwork here and cap it with that other fender, and then put all them square nuts in here. So I'm going to air hammer those out and put new square nuts in and weld up the trim holes. So it should be pretty close at that point. Oh, and I got to patch that stupid little spot there, but I'm not quite halfway, I don't think, but it takes a lot of time for me to do that stuff. But I got the bottom of this fender, if you remember, it was all smashed in right on that body line, and I got that all pulled out, and I don't even know if it'll need any body filler. It turned out pretty good, but I straightened the flange up all the way around, leveled this off. This turned out good, man. It you know, when you're not afraid to put some time in. Of course I have to, because I don't want to buy a new fender, you know what I mean? So hopefully tomorrow night it'll be a little bit further along. I'm not saying it'll be done tomorrow night, but I could hope, but I don't know if it will be or not. I'm more than likely going to run out of MIG gas. Or not gas, but, well, actually, let me check it here. Oh boy, that ain't looking good. Yeah, I'm pretty low. Dang it. That wire was what I meant. Getting pretty low on wire. I still might have enough, I don't know. Probably not. That's where I'm at. So that is, might as well put an X on the calendar, because this day is pretty much done. Time to clean up and clean up the driveway, the garage, get the car in, and I need to go in and clean up. And then I'm going to have a cheeseburger for supper. Supper, dinner, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, guys, I'll see y'all tomorrow.